my name is Arputha Rani. My team number is 262691. I am first presenter of this presentation. So today our group going to discuss on detail about Marx's law of motions of capitalism and briefly compare the theory with the theory of economic development by Adam Smith. Chapter 5, figure 5.1 and chapter 10, figure 10.2. So this is our group members. Karl Marx was a German revolutionist and can be considered a philosopher, historian, sociologist, political theorist, journalist, and economist. He was born on 5 May 1818 at Prussia to a Jewish family that converted to Protestantism during his childhood. He used his influence in the journalism sector in spread his views. Marx believed that human societies develop through class struggle. There is a gap between rich and poor. For instance, in capitalism, there is a manifestation of conflict and that helps control the means of production and those considered as a working class. Labor is sold and the workers get wages in return for their work. This critical approach is known as historical materialism. Let's see the history of theory. Marx saw society evolving through 6 stages. In the earliest stage, which he called primitive communism, there were no antagonistic classes, no exploitations, and no class struggles. People held land in common ownership and jointly cooperated to wrest a major living from nature. The efficiency of production was very low, and thus workers could not consistently produce a surplus beyond the subsistence needed by themselves and their dependents. Slavery permitted a higher development of productive forces of society, but eventually it became a barrier to further progress. Slaves were not the most highly motivated workers, and slave rebellions shocked society and tore it apart. Eventually, the system was overthrown and replaced by feudalism, a new set of relations of production that accommodate the new forces of production. Under slavery, slaves appeared to get nothing for their labor, even though they do receive subsistence. In the feudal system, serfs were allowed to work a few days per week and on the land assigned to them, but were forced to work the other days on the lord's land. This was obvious exploitation. Serfs had a greater incentive to work well than did the slaves, and feudalism brought a higher development of society's forces of production. But the system finally limited further progress, and it was overthrown and superseded by the capitalism. Although Marx passionately hated capitalism, he paid tribute to the great increase in productivity and production that it unleashed. In capitalism, we have 2 classes, which is bourgeois, the owners, and the proletariat, the working class. These bourgeois will buy workers, which is proletariat, in cheap and make use them as a worker and do profit. The state becomes an instrument of force used by the capitalists against workers. The proletariat oppressed by the bourgeois until they rise up. This is the concept of capitalism. This come up with a new social system, which is socialism. In socialism, puts human needs ahead of profit. Under the socialism, private property in consumer goods is permitted, but the capital and the land are publicly owned by the central government, local authorities, or cooperatives promoted and regulated by the state. Production is planned, as is the rate of investment, with the profit motivate and the free market eliminated as guiding forces for the economy. The dialectical process continues until finally the state with us away the pure communism prevails. So this is what I explained previously. So the theory of history, using this theory of history as the backdrop, Marx sought to lay bare the economic low motion LOM of modern society. Karl Marx wanted to determine the process through which the forces of production FOP within capitalism will produce their antithesis and inevitable demise, just as had slavery and feudalism earlier. Six important interrelated concepts in the LOM of capitalism is first is labor theory of value, the labor theory, second is labor theory of exploitations, third is capital accumulations, the fourth is centralization of capital and concentration of wealth, and fifth is reserve army of the unemployment and immiserizations of proletariat, and sixth is class conflict. So this is the process of the law of motions. Here we'll discuss the labor theory value 2, theory of exploitation. First, we see the labor of theory. The capitalism organized society by putting people to work to produce commodities that were then sold for profit and satisfying human needs. So here we see the commodity we buy or sell in the market, we get money and it make it profit. So to produce commodity we definitely need labor time. The value of commodity determines by the necessary socially labor time embodied SNLT. Here we see the formula of average SNLT increase or decrease. The value of product still same. For example, suppose to produce a pair of labor needs 10 hours, but labor A take 20 hours and labor B take 5 hours to produce a pair of shoes. The value of the shoes in market is still same. To Marx, labor times determine the absolute value of goods and services. Next, we see the labor exploitation. The labor exploitation F4, which is the labor power versus labor time, and surplus value, the rate of surplus value, and the profit or the rate of profit. The exploitation means an action of using someone unfairly for your own advantage by purchasing the commodity that can create a value greater than its own. This commodity is a labor power. Here we must distinguish carefully between Marx's concept of labor power and labor time. This theory states that profit is the result of exploitations of wage earners by their employees. So, the labor time is the duration of work to produce a commodity. The labor power is a person's ability to work to produce a commodity. The labor time considered a normal condition of production, and the average scale and the intensity of the labor time. Labor time includes the direct labor in producing the commodity. The labor power itself a commodity that bought and sold in the market. It is what the capitalists need to make profits. I want to explain about the labor power. The picture says that the final good which produced by the laborers will sell or bought in market. So that's what we call the commodity, and the consumer will pay as an exchange value by using money, and the money will make it a profit for the capitalist. What is labor power, and what determines value of labor power. So the value of labor power is determined by the socially necessary labor time required to produce the cultural necessities which is consumed by the laborers and families. So For example, if the necessities could be produced in 4 hours per day, the value of the commodity labor power would be 4 hours of the 4 hours of labor time per day. If the necessity could be produced only in 2 hours per day, the value of the commodity labor power would be 2 hours of labor time per day. The value of labor power will be for 50%, which is 4 minus 2 over 44 hours. So two important points require emphasis here, which is the market wage paid to workers were according to their labor power, which is market wage equals to labor power equals to SNLT, which is social necessary labor time. Second is market wage is sufficient only to purchase the cultural subsistence required for survival and perpetuation of labor force.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Anitta again. My metric number is 264503. I'm going to continue the theory of the exploitation. The first one I want to explain is surplus value. The surplus value is exploitation of worker cannot occur when the productivity is so low. It means the labor power always not equal to the labor time. Exploitation of worker will arise when they produce more in a day than they must consume. The employer only pay the worker the full market value, but only the part the value of labor create. Also, the capitalist set the length of the workday, such as 6 hour, 12 hour, and so on. Necessity force the worker to go to work, and last order of production garner a surplus value. Here you can see a formula rate of surplus value, or we call as a rate of exploitation. The formula is S per V multiplied by 100. S is surplus value, V is variable capital. Marx designed the part of capital invested in machinery and raw material as constant capital, which is C. Capital that grow as wages for purchases of labor power is B. The extra value that the capitalist take without compensating the worker is called surplus value, which is S. As you can see here is a figure of Marx theory of exploitation. The capitalists employ the labor whom they supply with the required machinery to convert raw cotton into yarn. Suppose that in 6 hours time, the total money of cost of production is 50. How we can get 50 ringgit? As you can see on the figure, it's 3 for labor power, cotton for 10, and 2 to use up the value of spindle. That's how you can get 50 ringgit. According to Marx, 6 hours of labor time is sufficient to produce output to pay for labor power. The capitalist can gain profit by lengthening the working day without paying. It means labor power is more than labor time is more than the labor power. For example, the capitalist force the worker to work an extra 6 hours, so the capitalist will secure a surplus value of RM3. The conclusion is, by asking the worker to work extra hours, labor can be exploited by their employer to gain profit. Here is an alternative approach to calculate rate of surplus or exploitation. The normal paid working hour is 6 hours. So for example 1, if you extend working hour to 12 hours, it means you add another 6 hours. So 6 per 6 multiplied by 100, you can get 100%. For example 2, if you extend to 15 hours, which means you extend another 9 hours. So 9 per 6 multiplied by 100 equal to 150%. For example 3, if you extend the working hour to 80 hours, it means you add another 12 hours, so you just divide 12 hours per 6 multiply by 100 and you can get a 200%. Last example, if you extend to 9 hours, it means you just add another 3 hours. So 3 per 6 multiply by 100 and you can get 100%. There are two modes of exploitation. The first one is absolute surplus value. Absolute surplus value is no longer the working day without corresponding increase in labor compensation. The second one is a relative surplus value. You decrease the necessary labor time needed to reproduce labor power. This is accomplished by cheapening the value of labor power by increasing productivity. As you can see at the bottom, you can increase a surplus value if the efficiency of production is increased and the value of worker labor power is decreased. If the worker necessity could produce in shorter time, a larger share of new value will go to the capitalist. Let us assume that the working day will shorten from 12 hours to 10 hours. For 12 hours, we divide 6 hours for worker and 6 hours for capitalist. For 10 hours, we divide 4 hours for worker and 6 hours for capitalist. So our rate of exploitation will increase. As you can see at the right, the rate of exploitation increased from 100% to 150%. Next one, I want to explain about the rate of profit. The rate of profit is ratio of surplus value to the total capital invested. At the right, you can see the formula. S per C plus B. S is surplus value, C plus B is cost, which is C constant capital and B is variable capital. We gonna do some calculation based on figure 10.1, which is a figure of Marx theory of exploitation as we see before. So the total cost of production is for 12 hours is 15 plus 20, you can get Rn to 27. As you can see here, just add these two. The surplus value of 12 hours is 3. And the rate of profit, as I showed before the formula, surplus value per total cost. So 3 divided by 27 multiplied by 100 and you can get 11.1%.
My name is Rafifah binti Atiqah. My metric number is 264321. I would like to touch on the 3A, the capital accumulation and the falling rate of profit. What is capital accumulation? Capital accumulation refers to an increase in assets from investment or profits and is one of the building blocks of a capitalist economy. Individuals and companies can accumulate capital through investment. According to Marx, the rate of profit P prime received by capitalists will tend to fall over the long run. Among the reasons is the drive toward increasing efficiency through mechanization and labor-saving inventions. Mechanization is the desire to improve productivity by using machinery, while labor-saving inventions is the replacement of labor with machine. This raises what Marx called the organic composition of capital as Q. Notice that it is the ratio of constant capital, which is C, to total capital, which is C plus V. Notice that this new equation indicates that the rate of profit P prime varies directly with the rate of surplus value S prime, and inversely with the organic composition of capital Q. Therefore, as capitalists invest relatively more in machinery and less in labor power, organic composition of capital Q rises. and the rates of profit P prime falls. Why capitalists still use machinery instead of labor even though they know that profit will fall? There are two reasons. First, the enterprise that leads in promoting efficient production through the use of more and better constant capital will temporarily receive extra profits by lowering its cost of production. Eventually, product prices will fall to reflect the lower costs, and the employer who lags behind the trend toward mechanization in a particular industry will not survive. Second, the greater the efficiency of production, the lower the value of labor power. The number of hours required to produce the subsistence and the greater the total amount of profit produced per working day. The dynamics of capitalism inevitably lead to an increase of organic composition of capital. Marx perceived certain offsetting forces to the falling rates of profit. First, the intensity of exploitation S prime can be raised by forcing the workers to increase their pace of work or by lengthening their working day. Second, wages temporarily may be cut below their value. Third, the constant capital may be cheapened. The ratio of constant capital to labor is a value relationship, and as machinery and raw materials become cheaper, the rise in the organic composition of capital and the fall in the rates of profit both become slower. Fourth, growing population in relation to jobs and increasing technological unemployment are conducive to setting up new industries that use much labor and little capital. The high rates of profits in such industries enter into the average rates of profit for the system as a whole. Fifth, foreign trade raises the rates of profit by cheapening the elements of both constant capital and the necessities of life. In addition, capital invested in colonies yields higher rates of profit because the ratio of constant to variable capital is lower and because the exploitation of colonial workers is more intense than the exploitation of wage labor at home. Finally, the rates of exploitation is increased by reducing the value of labor power through increased efficiency of production. Note that several of these factors that partially offset the falling rates of profit increase the rates of exploitation and further immiserize the proletariat. Hence, class consciousness is heightened and the probability of revolution is increased.
My name is Nur Solehah Naimah binti Abdul Nasser, metric number 264356, and today I'm going to explain about part 3B, which is capital accumulation, worsening a business crisis. As you can see here, first, Karl Marx attacked this law stating that C equal to M equal to C, which is C is commodity, M is money, is a simple commodity of production. Same law said that money is just medium of exchange. For example, you can see here, we use money to buy food and clothes. Second, under large scale of capitalist production, the process of exchange becomes M to C to M. People buy in order to sell. For example, capitalist people, they have money, then they buy a commodity like raw material, machinery or labor power in order to get money. As you can see here, money equal to commodity equal to money. Marx say that this is not make any sense because the value of M is still the same. So, Marx extend the process of exchange become M to C to M prime. M prime is greater than M because they exploit the labor with a given lower wages, so that the amount of surplus value squeezed out to the productive worker means that they get higher profit. They give money less than what you work for. For example, they give wages only enough to buy a basic need such as food or others. As you can see this illustration, this money, They exploit working class, which is proletariat, in order to get a surplus value, so they get higher profit. As you can see in the slide before, M prime is greater than M right, so there is an increase in the investment in capital. So, the rapid investment in capital temporarily increase a labor and a demand for labor. So, when there is increase in demand of labor, there are higher wages that capitalists must pay. Number 2, when there is a higher wages that capitalists must pay, it will lead to a decrease in rate of surplus value and profit. So it will cause a decrease expansion and will turn our economy downward or depression. Number 3, the depression make or destroy the monetary capital and a fiat capital. So it enables capitalists to buy a smaller one at a bargain price. Number 4 is when capitalists able to buy a smaller one at a bargain price, the factory become closed and the price of commodity is decreases and it will lead to decrease in wages. Number 5, the rate of surplus value will be increased and thus restore a profit and thus the investment increase again. So number 6, according to Marx, each business cycle is a greater magnitude than the previous one. So you see here, the peak is higher than previous peak. So this condition can be achieved according to Marx with first business struggle and second is social revolution. Next is part 3C, which is capital accumulation, increase the technological unemployment. So previous slide we say increase in capital accumulation and investment greater the business cycle, right? So when the business expand mean the economy is going well. So people plus development of science and technology make machines are more cheaper and more efficient. So it equal to loss of value of human capital and make low payment and low unemployment. As you can see in this illustration, employment office, no more job vacancy. This means that human capital is replaced by a machine, since a machine is more cheaper and more efficient. Thus, it will increase technological unemployment. Next is part 4, which is centralization of capital and concentration of wealth. Growing size of firm, weakening the competition into fewer hands. Let's imagine that capitalist is competing by selling the same commodity for a lower price to attract customers. So, the emerging of monopoly power occur when there is increasing of capital centralization and concentration. So, the more monopoly power exists, the larger firm able to obtain economy of scale and producing at a lower average cost compared to smaller firm. This means that where there is a monopoly, the larger firm will make more profit because they can reduce their surplus value compared to smaller firm. So, this results in the elimination of a smaller firm and the growth of monopoly. Let's say that capitalists become more successful when it comes to competition between the larger and the smaller. Capital accumulation, economy of scale, and the dominance of the corporation is business organization would bring a centralization of capital into fewer hands. That means here that capitalists will win because they exploit a labor. As you can see in this illustration, they give a low wages and high rent. So, they eliminate our smaller business and become monopoly, increase the centralization of capital and the concentration of wealth. Part 5 is reserve army of the unemployed and immiserization of the proletariat. First, the market wages is sufficient only to purchase the cultural subsistence in order to survive. As you can see in this illustration, capitalists, they own a property of capital because of private property of ownership means that the property can be only owned by capitalists. So the capitalists say, I want you to work with me, I give you money, and you have no choice because you need the money in order to buy a food or clothes. Simple meaning here is that the capitalist is exploit the labor by giving a lower wages since you have no other choice but to work for them. Second, the worker is forced to work sufficiently long to create a surplus value for capitalists. As you can see here in this illustration, if you work or build a commodity, the value is this much. You only get this much because all the surplus value that will be directly to the capitalist. The capitalist is not even working. You are the one is working here. Why did the surplus value goes to capitalist who is not working? So this means that the capitalist is exploit you to work for so long but only get a lower wages because all the surplus value goes to capitalists. So when there are a revolution, labor will replaced by a machine. So unemployment rate will increase. And number 4, the labor will become more poorer since the capitalists get richer. Lastly is class conflict. There is a huge gap between the working class, proletariat, middle class, and the capitalists. Okay, first, as you can see here, the concentration of the wealth among is fewer. Means that wealth people or capitalists is fewer, but there is a lot of people in the working class or proletariat that get more poorer each day because of the exploitation. Thus, it made relative impoverishment of the worker because the capitalists accumulate wealth by exploiting labor. Means that no matter how long a proletariat work, they still receive a same salary. So, there is a growing in misery, oppression, slavery, degradation, and exploitation. As a result, a working class or proletariat raise the sense of solidarity and they will revolt. So, there is a versus in relation of production, ROP, and the force of production, FOP, and will become rapidly transformed. The worker overthrow the capitalists and establish the dictator of the proletariat. As a result, a private ownership becomes a state ownership of production. Means that everyone can produce a commodity, not only just capitalists. So, the rate of capital expansion is stabilized and the exploitation of workers is eliminated. So, from capitalists, it will become socialist.
Hi and Assalamualaikum. My name is Khadijah Zahrah binti Adwan. My metric number is 264421. My topic is the consequence of capital accumulation. This is comparison between Marx and Adam Smith's theory. This is Adam Smith's theory while this is Marx's theory. I will tell about this at my next slide. Theory of Economic Development, Adam Smith. According to Adam Smith, he contended that division of labor served capital accumulation. These things work together to increase labor of productivity. The rise in labor productivity will increase national output, which widen the market and justify further DOL and capital accumulation. As a result of capital accumulation, the wage fund increase and wage rise. Higher wage motivate further productivity growth. The rise in national output increase the good available for consumption, thus constitutes the wealth of nation. The law of motion of capitalists, Karl Marx. According to Karl Marx, capital accumulation will cause three things. First, falling rate of profit. Second, business crisis. Third, technology unemployment. This outcome produced centralization of capital and concentration of wealth, as well as rising unemployment and poverty. The polarization of capitalists and workers lead to class conflict and the collapse of capitalism. For the conclusion, Adam Smith believed that capital accumulation will give positive effect, while Karl Marx believed that capital accumulation will give negative effect. Based on theory Adam Smith, economic development, division of labor serve capital accumulation, while Karl Marx law of motion theory, capital accumulation will cause falling rate of profit, business crisis, and technological unemployment. The outcome for Adam Smith, both division of labor and capital accumulation will increase labor productivity and increase national output. While for Karl Marx, the outcome produced centralization of capital and concentration of wealth, as well as rising unemployment and poverty. The result of capital accumulation. For Adam Smith, wage fund increase and wage increase and will motivate further productivity growth. The rise in national output increase the goods available for consumption, thus constitutes the wealth of nation. For the Karl Marx, the result is the polarization of capitalists and workers lead to class conflict and the collapse of capitalism.